to Olhao, Portugal, and the Ria Formosa. Today we are in the east of the Algarve region in the south of Portugal, some 40 miles approximately west of Spain and the Costa del Sol. This area of Portugal is known as the Algarve, and the area that I'm in now is one of those fascinating liminal areas in between the sea and the land. Olhao is a fishing town and has hundreds of years of history as being a place where, well, an active fishing port. The area that I'm in right now is to the west of the town and has a large number of these basins, which were historically used for the cultivation of shrimp and of small bivalves, and for the harvesting of sea salt. And there are a number of piles of sea salt that you can see scattered around the landscape, the largest being just there. This area of Portugal is very different to the same geographic area of Spain along the south coast, in that there are a number of islands which protect the mainland as a sort of a barrier. Although you're unlikely to be able to see it very clearly, in the picture right now is the lighthouse on the island of Farol, which in fact the word Farol means lighthouse, so it's quite a cute name. This island stretches some several dozen kilometers across the south of the area and is essentially a land break in between the mainland where we're standing now and the Atlantic Ocean. This has a number of really interesting characteristics in that it calms the sea, it acts as a filtration point for minerals, it creates a number of beaches, and given the relatively shallow depth in between here and there, it creates an incredible aquaculture environment. And this area of Portugal is very much known for its clams. Mussels are also grown here. In fact, I should say, not just clams, but multiple different types of clams, which is really quite fascinating. The vegetation here, as you'll notice, is also really quite interesting. There are a number of plants that grow in this brackish water, neither fresh nor entirely salty. And the characteristics of the plants are that they live, and again, I'm no horticulture expert, but they live in quite a harsh environment, given that it is quite warm here for much of the year. But they are fascinating in terms of their structure. I'm wary about pausing and looking at plants for any extended period of time, given the fact that I am probably the least horticultural member of my family, so I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about. To the west of, to the east of here is a town by the name of Tavira. Tavira has a number of beaches, one particularly known as the Praia do Barril, and another known as the Praia de Ancoras, which means the beach of anchors, which is a paean to the fallen fishing industry. 200 approximately painted black anchors have been buried on the beach sideways, with the spike of the anchor pointing up as a kind of a gravestone, a monolith or a number of monoliths to the fishing industry. It is said that overfishing in the 1960s and 1970s and the influx of fishermen from outside the local area essentially destroyed the local fish stocks, and in the space of 15 years caused the collapse of the fishing industry. which meant that the hundreds of fishing boats were scrapped and the anchors preserved and turned into this extraordinary and quite poignant monument. Although unfortunately there aren't any visible today, these pools are frequented by flamingos, which spend a portion of their year here and the remainder in North Africa. You may just be able to see a handful of birds, although those I believe are not flamingos. Those are like terns to me. There we are. Or egrets, I should say. Egrets of veiling wind. We'll see one towards the end. Tavira and the salt pans there attract a great number of flamingos, and you can see flocks of 100 or even 150, perhaps 200 altogether. And the sight is quite extraordinary. The flamingos, being filter feeders, get their colour from the shrimp that they eat. And one typically tends to think of flamingos as being pink, but interestingly, the flamingos that frequent this area are much more white. I don't know if that's because the type of shrimp that they eat here is less colourful or for some other reason, but they're certainly a very striking white with only just a few flecks of pink on them, and that makes them particularly stand out against the gloomy blue and green of the pans. The Ria Formosa is the Portuguese equivalent of what we call an area of outstanding natural beauty. It is benefited by a park. So there is a Parque de Ria Formosa, which you can visit, and there are several bird watching sites there. And the most interesting thing about the Ria Formosa Park is that there are chameleons, which were introduced about 100 years ago or so, roaming around. And although I can't show you one today, last week I did see one. The buildings that you can see in the background form something called Marina Village, which dates from about 2008, 2009, and is a large complex of fairly luxury apartments, which were created on the site of the old fishing harbour. At some point during the 80s or the 90s, I'm not precisely sure which, the area was filled in with hardcore, and the land compacted and turned into a series of these pleasant flats. Unfortunately, the nature of flats means that they're not particularly suitable for local people, and that means that they've been largely bought up for Airbnb and for tourists who come to retire or spend their doting years in the sun. And whilst that is a shame, because it means that there's relatively little provision for local folks, it is a very handy resource for those wishing to spend some time in the area in apartment life. So we've come to the objective of today's video, and that is these fascinating salt pans. The production of salt dates back to thousands of years before Christ, and is a very simple and straightforward process whereby areas of land are carved out, usually very close to the sea, water is pumped in, the area is sealed, and then the sun does its magic, and the combination of the minerals in the water produces salt. Now, you can probably see that this is pink salt. And indeed, this is going to be harvested once this water has evaporated, and this will produce an amazing pinkish salt, which sells for a margin much greater than white salt, for reasons that I really don't understand. As promised, here is that wonderful pile of salt that's been harvested from the pans. Like millions and millions of tourists that come to this area of Portugal before me, I found the area quite charming. The folks in Olhao are friendly and quite distinctive, and very aware of their history and their heritage. But Olhao is definitely tinged with sadness. For the first time in my life, I've been able to see gentrification in steps happening really quickly. When I first came here in 2018, there were these flats that I mentioned before, these apartment buildings, and one other locally. And in the 5 years since then, the number of different renovations and developments is absolutely shot up. I think, despite the difficulties around disposable income and so forth, Portugal's property developers realised that Olhao represented and presented a type of experience that people were looking for that was very different to the sort of commercial Vila Moura, Costa del Sol, Albufeira alternatives. And this very much more laid back, relaxed lifestyle was something that people were looking for, an experience that people were looking for. The first time I visited Olhao, we came to the fish market and the vegetable market, which are together buildings designed by Gustav Eiffel. Absolutely beautiful, gorgeous red brick structures. And they are gorgeous pieces of history, gorgeous pieces of architecture. But they're also symbols of the history of the town. And the much less commercial nature of its space. there is a mural in the town which decries the advent of tourism, and essentially says that in 2017 Olhao died, which is a dreadfully sad thing to say, but I think it's reflecting that in 2017 the penny dropped, I think, and although I think probably the the writing was on the wall before then, the penny dropped, and that meant that Olhao had somehow lost some of its previous allure and its charm, which I think is a dreadful shame. I've never spoken to a local person about their thoughts and feelings on this matter, and I'm sure that opinions will vary. But even seeing that sign made me feel very sad. Tourism is both a force for good and a force for bad, but seeing it displayed, you know, uniquely as the cause of the death of a town is really quite a sobering thought. And I'd very much like to have a conversation with the artist that created that mural to understand a little bit more about the imbalance or the issues that increased tourism has created. Rather strange approach to municipal works, but just to the left there we see the municipal storage area for green refuse bins and a few broken cars, and I believe there's a dog pound in there as well, which is what you can hear in terms of the barking in the background. It's a stork, resident of the local area. possibly one of the ones living on that chimney over there. Well, 20 minutes has passed. It's been a fascinating trip around the salt pans. It's been a real pleasure to have you with me. I wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day. Cheerio.